Howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of TASB Talks. I'm your host, Matt Mitchell, Senior Communications Specialist here at TASB, and today I'm joined by Dox Gonzalez, Division Director of TASB Governmental Relations, and a very special guest today from Friendswood ISD, TASB President Tony Hopkins. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt.
So how's it going? How are you doing? I know you've been president since for about a couple months now, since TexEdCon. How have things been going for you?
Things have been going really well. We finished up, a great delegate assembly, great convention, and now rolling into the new year. A lot of work having to be done. We completed a new strategic plan. A lot of things really got accomplished in the last year, and so now it's rolling out those big initiatives and really kind of rolling into a new year. And then focusing on a lot of new things with the legislature not in session this time. We've got a lot of initiatives that we're trying to do to prepare for next year. So a lot of groundwork that's being done here this year for TASB.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of expand a little more on that. Obviously, every new president we have, they kind of have a vision and their specific goals for the next year. So what exactly is it that you want to accomplish in the next year?
So I think number one on the agenda, and you'll see it really in some of the articles I've written for the Lone Star magazine, is for board members to use their voice. And this is a key time right now. When you get in the middle of a legislative session, it's really hard to get people's attention. Right now is a great time for people to be reaching out to both their city and county leaders, but even more importantly, we have every one of our House members is up for re-election. The primaries are coming up in March. Once we know who wins the primaries, that's probably 90% of those races are decided in the primaries. And so getting to spend time between March and really next November, building those relationships, talking about issues, and then helping to craft legislation. And I think it's a key time to build those relationships. And then those relationships will pay dividends down the road when you need to pick up the phone in the middle of a legislative session. And so I think it's really a groundwork a year for TASB, and I think it is for our board members as well across the state of Texas.
I've always said that one of the most receptive that legislators are going to be is when they're running for office. So now is a really great time to get out there and be meeting with candidates, all candidates really, and letting them know the challenges and opportunities that your districts have, and really just making sure that they understand what's going on the ground.
Well, and I think another thing that's really key right now is we've just come out of a very large and significant legislative session, and there are lots of laws that were passed, lots of rules, and we're now implementing those. And I think school districts are seeing it across the state of Texas. What are some of the unintended consequences of those rules? How can we tweak things and make them better? And then what are new issues? And so I think it's one where if you approach a legislature and say, hey, we passed this law, here's something that nobody really thought of, they want to fix those things. And so now's a great time to be talking about it. And it's easier to start crafting that legislation early if you're talking about those things early. One of the things for our home district that we kind of do that's unique is we have a consortium with a couple of other districts to serve severely challenged behavioral students. And a lot of those facilities have been shut down by the TEA over the last few years in the Houston area. Well, we opened up one in our old original junior high. We've actually had great success. Before, students would go into these programs and never come back to their home campus. We're actually sending kids back. And so I've been spending time and kind of putting that on the radar of different legislators to say, hey, here's something that is really probably needed. And we need to find some regional solutions because a 6,000 student district can't do this by themselves. And so we need to have regional partnerships. And it's a really expensive proposition. And so that's something that on our local level, we really see a need in Galveston County. How can we expand it? But I think what we're hearing as our superintendents have gone out is this is not just a Galveston County problem. This is a state of Texas problem, is how do we best serve these students that have some of the biggest challenges? And how can we do that in a partnership model that works well?
Well, and if I could say, Tony, you talked about taking what has been passed by the legislature and and working through it and seeing how it's affecting your district and communicating back to legislators. But it's really important to be communicating also to the community as well. And I know that you all do a good job of that. But school leaders should really be reaching out to their communities and informing them about how legislation is impacting their district, and some of the decisions that are happening at the local level sometimes are really made at the state level, and letting them know that those are things that are coming from there.
Well, I'll give you a real world example. We just come back from Thanksgiving, and this week there's now a statewide requirement to have panic devices that you can use throughout the schools. Well, Friendswood ISD, we've had that even before that law was passed. This week we had 2 accidental lockdowns that were triggered. And our community really didn't understand that literally every employee can lock down a campus from their ID badge. And had a new employee that had it in their pocket and bumped more than 3 times against something while working with a student. And all of a sudden, her entire school is locked down while the spelling bee is going on. And our police were on campus in 50 seconds. And so in a lot of ways, it's a good thing. But then parents were a little annoyed once we explained it to them that, number one, we've had this for a while, that anyone can call a lockdown. This is one of the unintended consequences of everybody having on their hip one of these devices. People were like, okay, now I get it. Can we design? We had a few engineers that are working on how can we better design this product. But, it's one of those unintended consequences that people just don't think about. But it's a really good thing. Especially if there was, a worst case scenario.
So I wanted to kind of go backward a little bit. I
Sure.
wanted to get a little more of your background info for those listening and watching who might not know. You've been doing this for a long time. You've been on the TASB board since I believe 2017, but even going back before that, I wanted to know kind of your background and what led you to doing this.
So I grew up, I'm born and raised in Friendswood, Texas. The schools were a very, very big part of my growing up, and was raised by a community of folks. And the school gave me a lot of different opportunities, from drama to sports announcing to all kinds of different things across the spectrum and academics. And so when I graduated from college, graduate school, I came back to Friendswood. And I always knew that I wanted to pay back the community that really helped raise me. And I wanted students that came after me to have the same opportunity to explore all their passions and find what theirs is and then go pursue it. And so did that, volunteered in a lot of ways, volunteered as the football announcer for a long time. But then really when I had a 2-year-old, we had somebody approach me from the community, a mentor of mine, both in business and in life, and said, Tony, I got an opportunity for you. I'll never forget that drive. I was driving home on the Friday of Father's Day weekend. And he said, you need to run for school board. We need a finance guy. And that's actually my background. I did mergers and acquisitions for almost 20 years. And now I'm a fractional CFO for about the last 8 years. And he said, you need to run. Our financial guru on the board is retiring after 12 years. And we really think you would be a great replacement. And that was 2008. When I got elected in 2008, his big sales pitch was, you'll never face an opponent because you get to talk to all the voters. We have November elections throughout football season. And I didn't. The first 4 runs, I didn't have an opponent. And then did have one last year in 2024. But the passion was, let's create or maintain a great school district that provides great opportunities for our students and really empowers leaders across the state of Texas. We're not a huge district, but we've created a lot of great homegrown leaders that go out and impact whatever community they end up in. And so that's kind of what drove me to do it. Once I got in, I found I really had a passion for it. There's a lot of business aspects to running any business, a school district. TASB is no different. And so did that for a number of years, almost got off of the board at one point, had a real reaffirmation of why I should be there. And I realized that what was happening in our local district was really affected by what happens in Austin, lesser degree DC, but really Austin. And so that's when I started getting more involved at a regional level. I got on the Gulf Coast Area Association of School Boards, did that for a number of years, and then ran for the TASB board. And so at one point I did all 3. I was president of the Gulf Coast Board for a while. And then when I became an officer at TASB, that's when I dropped off of that one. But really wanting to have an impact in Austin and beyond just our district, because forever, for maybe the first 8 years, we were really focused insularly in Friendswood, and we realized no, we have to branch out because there's too much outside the district that affects what goes on inside the district.
So we're here in early December now. As we look ahead to the holidays, we're also looking ahead to the new year. What can trustees be doing in their communities?
Well, as Tony mentioned, this is a perfect time because legislators have more capacity to listen and to meet with folks back home. And so it's a really great time to have open houses at districts, a great time to invite legislators to football games, to your band concerts, to choir concerts. Lots of different things that you can just get them in and see what districts are doing and how kids are doing. Because, a lot of legislators haven't been in a school since either they were in school or maybe their kids were in school. So it really is important to see that really schools are not what they were even 20 years ago. I mean, they're so far beyond that, and kids are learning incredible things and doing incredible things, and from robotics programs to various CTE programs that they're running. And they really need to showcase those items. It is a great time to build coalitions, like I said, with city and county folks to get out and speak to legislators, because when they're hearing from a broad base, from the business community, from the city, county, school folks, they're really getting a broader picture of what is happening and the needs of the community, and really how communities are intertwined. It's not just a county issue. It's not just a school issue. These are issues that, the school issue feeds up into the workforce of a community. So it's really the time to start building those coalitions and getting out there and meeting with legislators about those. And I'm sure you have some specific examples, Tony.
Yeah, I think it's all relationship building. It's one of those things that if you are able to build a relationship, you can have those honest conversations, and that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the hallways of the Capitol in the middle of a busy session when they only have 4 minutes. When you have an hour to spend and talk with somebody, let them see real world things that are going on. I think that lends more credibility. When you bring solutions to them, here's the issue. Here's a way that we might be able to solve it. It's really interesting. And so I had a phone call last night with a citizen in our community coming up with a solution, and she'll be back in Austin trying to pitch it statewide, but we're going to try something locally. And so it was just selling me on the idea, and it's like, okay, this makes sense. 1 or 2 other districts do it across the state of Texas. And so got to think through all the unintended consequences of it, but it kind of seemed interesting, and it might help in teacher recruiting, which every one of us needs. There's a real need on teacher retention and teacher recruitment. So anything we can do to make that better is key. And then, I think it's also building coalitions, not just with other school board members or with legislators, but across communities. And so I know different areas do it differently. Galveston County, we have a consortium that'll come together really this summer, focus on legislative priorities. And then we meet in the fall with ours. That's kind of the normal timeline we do it. But we're already talking. What are we learning from the last session? What will be the big things that we need to fix moving forward from that? And what issues are there? And I mentioned one earlier, but those are the type things that if you start getting those on the radar, and maybe one legislator goes, "Ooh, I really like that. Let's keep talking about it," and then they can also help you bring together different legislators that might be interested in that issue, and then finding folks that have that common theme. Because if we're pressing across the state of Texas on the same issue, as we really do, I would say 80% of our issues are probably universal. And if we can find people from every region across the state of Texas to be saying the same things individually, locally with their legislators, then I think we're going to be much more highly effective.
Well, Matt, I think that's a perfect segue to talk about grassroots meetings.
I was just going to say that is we big opportunity coming up in January through February. We have our regional grassroots meetings. Obviously, it's a big thing we do. And you mentioned priorities. That's going to be a great opportunity for trustees to get together. So I'm curious, Docs. I wonder if you could give us kind of a walkthrough of what that process is like. And then Tony, I'd love to get your perspective as someone who's obviously taken part before.
Yeah, well, TASB is unlike a lot of other associations in that our advocacy agenda comes from our members. It truly does come from the grassroots. We go out to every education service center region across the state and hold meetings where every superintendent and school board member is invited to come in and talk about the issues that are facing them locally there in the region. And then those regional priorities bubble up to the state level, where our delegate assembly then adopts them as the association's program, their legislative program. So we really do go out there, and as opposed to just having a legislative committee that comes up with all the issues, or an executive committee that comes up with all the issues, it really is local folks. And I tell trustees all the time when I see them, I say, if you want to have a voice in the TASB advocacy agenda process, if you want TASB advocating for your district's, the needs and things that are needed at the regional level, it's really important to come to these grassroots meetings and get involved.
Yeah, and I would, just to amplify on top of that, you might bring an issue, and I've been through a lot of them in 17 years. I've seen them done in different ways. If there's issues that you're passionate about, speak up at those meetings, because you really can sell a region on, this is an important issue and we need to include it, and here's why. And I've seen those conversations can be really rich. You can build the coalitions. We were talking about building coalitions. Well, when you have Region 4, we might have 80 to 120 people at a grassroots meeting. Well, if you have that large group, well, you're going to find people that have different passions, and maybe there's a subgroup that has a specific issue in special education. We have others that might be high property value districts and the issues they're facing. Well, you can bring those together. You can build those coalitions, have those conversations, and I think those are very valuable times. And then that actually goes all the way through to what's adopted. And so, as Doc's talked about, this is not a top-down process. It starts at the bottom. We've really spent a lot of time. We've made some changes at this last delegate assembly of how our advocacy process works, where we're collecting everybody's priorities from across the state of Texas, because most districts have them. And so we're really taking that information, building it up, providing that to the grassroots process, and then using that as it goes up. And that's what the priorities that are adopted by the delegate assembly really start with the grassroots meetings. You come up with those regional priorities that go to a state process, further winnowed down from the 20 different regions to come up with, 2 years ago, they came up with 2 big themes with some supporting things underneath. Previous years, we've had as many as 6 or 7. But what are the things that we really want the legislature to focus on that can have the most bang for the buck? And that's all started there at these grassroots meetings. So I know a Tuesday night or Wednesday night or Thursday night, whatever night it might be, can be tough, can be a long distance, but it's highly valuable to the organization. I also think it's highly valuable to the state of Texas that your voice is heard. If you can get somebody to that meeting, or get multiple people in the meeting, that is a great thing, because it's the start of the entire process.
Yeah, and one of the things I've always appreciated about those meetings is seeing trustees who maybe their districts aren't very much alike. Maybe have a rural and an urban district, and they're working together on a priority and what that might look like, and realizing that they're facing the same issues, and that while they might be a little nuanced, at the core there are things that are very similar. They can work together on.
Well, I'll give you a great example of that. It was when I first ran for the TASB board. I'll never forget I was calling different school board members across the region just to say, hey, I'm running for this position. And there was a district on the very northeast corner of Region 4. And the board member there said, well, my biggest issue is buses. And I said, well, tell me. Friendswood ISD is 14 square miles, so we're not very big. He said, we're 50 miles north to south and 20 miles east to west. So we're a big district, or 20 miles at the widest spot, but mainly more like 5 or 6. We wear out our buses left and right. Well, there was another fast growing district that was like 300 square miles. And they're like, we have the same issue. And so all of a sudden you had big districts, little districts, but in terms of students, but geographically they were all large. And it became a real hot button for these districts is the compensation for bus riders hadn't changed in forever. And that was one of their big things. Now, I don't know that it made it to the state priority, but it was a huge issue. And all these districts, all of a sudden, it just kind of caught on like wildfire that year. Is we have an expense, and a lot of our students, this is the only way they can get to school because their parents are already out at work, and we have to provide these buses. And when you're riding sometimes 200 miles a day, you wear out a bus really quick versus 20 miles a day.
Yeah. So just for the details, we'll be getting started in January with these grassroots meetings. Registration is open. It's available on the website. Folks can go and find their regional meeting. They're going to run from usually about 6:30 until about 8:30, about 2-hour meetings. But we have a few that will be running that have some an update to the education code credit before that. So trustees can look out for that. And I always say, if you can't attend the one in your region, you're welcome to attend one in a neighboring region, or sometimes the neighboring location is just closer and you can go to that one. So, that's certainly an option. But we'll be doing some student scholarships at the grassroots meetings. So everyone in attendance will be able to put in their name in a hat for a scholarship to give out to a student. And those have been really well received, I think, over the past few years that we've been doing them. And I've seen some of the pictures of the kids getting the big foam checks, and it always looks like a really great moment. So, I encourage folks to go and check their regional dates and get registered.
And you can go to tasb.org/training-events to find your region's event. You can find the grassroots page, and we've got all the events listed, kind of a little drop-down menu at the bottom. And I should mention dinner's provided. I know that's important for a lot of people that are going to be there. So there will be meals. Don't worry.
We don't want any hangry people.
We don't.
At the grassroots.
We do not. But I wanted to talk about, before we go, one other event we've got coming up in February. It's February 2nd through 3rd. We're going to be in Washington, D.C. once again for the Texas Federal Advocacy Conference. It's a big advocacy event we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years now. It's been a pretty big success. And so, again, I wanted to kind of get sort of a walkthrough of what that is. And then, Tony, you were there last year. We were both there. What has your experience been like?
Well, the Federal Advocacy Conference is something that has evolved over the years, and really, I think has reached a pretty good point in its evolution. And what it is it's one day of learning from Capitol insiders there, in DC, sometimes hearing from legislators, hearing from experts in different fields that really impact the federal side of schools. And in Texas, we don't often think about the federal side of education because, I think only 10% of the state of education budget comes from the feds. But you're talking about some really important pieces of the puzzle: accountability, special programs, Title I programs, special education, IDEA. These are things that are really important to schools and things that schools have to adhere to. But so you get that first day of learning, and then the second day is up on the Hill where trustees are invited to go and meet with their legislators and talk to them about the issues happening back in their home districts.
What I find is really interesting, I'd never done the federal advocacy, been invited to it, was actually in DC a number of years while the predecessor conferences were going on, and didn't really see the need at first. But then once I got there and realized, okay, number one, special education, that issue is on the list every single year. And when it was first put in place, the federal government was supposed to fund 40% of it. The numbers vary from year to year, 10%, 12%, 14%. With some of the cuts proposed, it could have been as low as 4 or 5%. Well, when the federal government doesn't fund that burden comes back to the state and to us locally. So that's one issue. But then we've seen really specific issues that we as a Texas group, have been able to go in and say, hey, this would really affect us. One was the bond guarantee program a couple of years ago that's run through the state of Texas that guarantees the bond debt of all of our local districts. Well, there was an artificial IRS cap that was in place. We brought that issue to a head, and really quickly, it got fixed in DC. And so that was a great win that came out of our meeting. And so, it was great to see action happen. Then we had another very, very specific issue that we were able to do the same thing. And I think with the changes right now going on in DC, it's even more important for us to have a voice there. Whether the Department of Education goes away and gets melded into different departments, understanding what the plans are and what they're doing and how they're going to fund things. Probably no point in the last 20 years has it been more important to have a voice in DC. And so that's why we'd really encourage, it's not too late to sign up. It's a great conference at the Willard Hotel, which is a great historic hotel. I love going and reading more of the history every time I was there, and right next to the White House. So it's a great place to have an event. Really good speakers. We bring in folks that are not just from the Capitol, but also from different organizations. Had one a few years ago that was talking about the budgeting process in school districts and really good concrete things that we could bring back to school districts. So it's not just advocating while you're there. You're also bringing back really good knowledge of things that could affect you at the state level. And so there's been a lot of those little issues that we don't really necessarily focus on here in Texas because it's not dictated by Austin, it's dictated by DC. And so knowing those issues, knowing where those funding sources may or may not be in the future is a key thing. And then being able to say, hey, this is really important to us, and focusing on one or two key issues, you can actually get your reps and senators to focus on those.
And again, that's February 2nd through 3rd in Washington, D.C. You can also find that event at tasb.org/training-events. Well, gentlemen, I think that's all the time we have today, but I want to say thank you so much for being here, Docs. As always, thank you for being on the show. And Tony, we loved having you on. This has been a great conversation, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I'm always down for a conversation like this.
And next time, Matt, we need to have an applause track for when we announce you.
Yes, of course.
I wanted to clap. I felt we needed something.
Yeah. So, little applause, and we'll work that into the budget and have that ready next time.
We'll get that done.
And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find us on Apple and Spotify and YouTube. And we'll see you next time.